Hello and welcome back to another video. Today I am making a diorama of some Vikings fighting a giant bear. Lucky for me, I already have the minis. If you're going to buy liquid green stuff and you want it to be liquid, then check for the bottle with the strongest green. Once the liquid green stuff is dry on the model, I add some fur texture, then prime the model in a dark brown. I apply a reddish contrast paint to the mouth, black dots for eyes, and a lighter, more yellowish brown on the top of the fur. I paint on an almost black wash on the lower spots on the mini to insinuate shadow. In this miniature box of Vikings, there's this one guy helping another wounded guy that I think will give an interesting narrative to the scene. I use contrast paints, metallics, normal paints for highlights, and a dark wash to give some depth. They are far from perfect, but as someone that does not paint miniatures that often, I'm actually quite pleased with how they turn out. The color scheme for the Vikings clothes is inspired by an AI generated picture from the prompt Viking clothes color scheme. The minis are done and onto my favorite part of any diorama build, the base. I have this box left from Easter, and I must say the lid is more tempting to me than the stale chocolate eggs inside. I use the lid to mark the size I need to cut it out. Then I dry fit it and use my hot wire to trim the outside before gluing it in place. This next stage is not super important, but I want to make sure the sculptor mold has something to grab onto. I use the rest of the XPS scraps and just glue them in a sort of cave-like shape with hot glue. For the sculptor mold, I mix it with water until I'm happy with the consistency and just smear it on the model. When I'm happy with the shape, I leave it to dry for about 24 hours. I want roots and trees in my diorama, so I collect some plants and sticks from my driveway and garden. Before I use anything I pick up from outside, I like to make sure I don't bring with me mold or other organisms that might cause problems later. I make a bath of isopropyl alcohol and water and let it soak overnight. Then I take them out and let them dry for another 8 hours. I attach the roots with Mod Podge. I use a small hand vise to drill a pilot hole for the trees, then use my hobby knife to make the hole big enough for the trunk. And I glue it in place with wood glue. I imagine the bear digging out rocks and roots and pushing them to the side. So I apply some rocks and sand in different sizes before spraying everything with isopropyl alcohol and gluing it in place with watered down Mod Podge. I only add ground texture to the parts that's not going to be covered in grass. The Vikings are 1 to 72nd scale, and I don't really have short enough static grass for that scale. But I have some miniature flocking, and I just sprinkle and push it into the glue. I glue some clump foliage to resemble bushes, and blend them into the rest with some coarse, then fine turf from Woodland Scenics. Another round of isopropyl alcohol and glue. I love the way the glue seeps into everything once the surface tension is removed. But it's a messy process, and I make sure to wipe away the excess before it has time to dry. The mound is looking a bit flat and boring, so I add a few hairs from an old paintbrush. And I think it really helps with the silhouette of the diorama. I then prime everything in black. Then a gradient of dark to light green. This next bit is a bit tedious, but I think it's worth doing. Oranges, greys and browns on the pebbles, then some light grey highlights on the bigger rocks as well. Here I try to give the soil a more three-dimensional look by painting some lighter brown, almost orange, on the high spots. I give all the logs some streaking of light brown to insinuate a bark texture. Then I go over with a pretty random stippling of a tan color. It's not that pretty up close, but gives a great effect from a distance. A dark brown wash is used to give additional shadows and dimension. The wash also tones down everything, like the smaller pebbles, and brings everything together. Then a finishing of light green on all of the bushes. The base is now pretty much done, and I need to remove the minis from their bases and attach them to the base. The rim of the Easter egg candy box gets a matte black, and with that, it's done! This is what I imagine to be the first of many videos in what I'd like to call the Vikings vs series. Let me know in the comments what you would like to see the Vikings fight next. Please also consider subscribing to the channel, and until next time, goodbye.